All right, welcome into 305 guys of the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on the Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Donno. You can follow him at Alex Donno. We're going to do kind of a combination episode today. We're going to hit a bunch of things that are happening in the sports world. We will talk, though, about the Martin Incognito thing for those old enough to remember it, kind of how that's played out over the last week. Before we do, we are two people old enough to remember it. Use the code 5 at Prize Picks. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Legal in the state of Florida. You can play NBA. NBA is back. The Heat are not back until Friday night in Toronto, but we will have coverage of all of that on 5 on the floor. Also, we've got the Four Nations final tonight, USA Canada, so you can play that. Kachuk is on the board. If you want to play that. Actually, I think it's actually his brother who may now. Actually, they haven't put him on the board yet. He was on the board earlier. Goalie shots on goal.
Oh, my bad. Hold on. Yeah, let me switch that over here.
Well, that's all they got on there right now. Hold on.
Yeah,
they got Reinhardt on there. If Reinhardt, of course, playing for the Canadian team, but I don't think they've added Kachuk yet. I guess because there's still questions about whether or not he's going to play. But I believe he's going to play. So go to Prize Picks, legal in the state of Florida. Put down 5, you get 50 to play. It's the official fantasy partner of the Five Reasons Sports Network. All right, Alex. We're going to talk about Martin Incognito. We'll get to it. I just want to hit a couple of other things quickly because this news just broke. Victor Wembanyama, potentially the new face of the league, has been diagnosed with, let me get the exact term here, deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. If you're familiar with that term and you're a Heat fan, you remember Chris Bosh, and that was 2015 and then 16, two different blood clots that ultimately led to the end of his career, where there was sort of a fight between the Heat, who were trying to protect him, and Bosh and his camp. I remember being up in Toronto during that playoff series, and Bosh's family was wearing shirts that said "Let Chris play," and Bosh was in the locker room, and as amenable as he always was talking to the media, he was like shut off from everybody. It's a very weird time. Bosh didn't end up playing in the NBA again. He's since acknowledged that pretty much the right thing was done at the time. Now, I'm not a doctor. I haven't diagnosed Wemby, obviously. And there have been situations like with Brandon Ingram, for instance, where this has been resolved and he's resumed playing. So that's my hope here. I think that's pretty much everybody's hope. I know, and I've reported before that the Spurs have done research on players like Wemby. There aren't many of them. And that was one of the reasons that they decided to fast track their rebuild, because typically players of his size, height, or have short careers. I don't think this is what they were thinking of. But again, we'll see how this plays out.
He's very young. I mean, it's not. I mean, short career. You're thinking like maybe 7 or 8 years.
7 or 8 years. No, and so Alice, I mean, I on this. I mean, this is. I think this would. Well, again, I don't want to go too far into the future. He's not going to play the rest of the season. Help them get a higher lottery pick, if nothing else. But I think this would be like devastating for the NBA if it goes too long. Like this is a build the league around type guy, personality wise, also.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as, and you were the one who broke the news to me because I was, getting the backstage area set up, and then as soon as we pop into the virtual studio, you're like, "Did you see the Wemby news?" I'm like, "What Wemby news?" And then you filled me in, and obviously, I don't think this just goes for Miami Heat fans, but any NBA fan, as soon as you hear deep vein thrombosis, we initially think of Chris Bosh and how that ultimately ended his NBA career. Now, every case of that, I'm sure, is different. Every person is unique. I think with Bosh, it was in his legs, not in his shoulder. I don't know if, I'm not a doctor. I couldn't tell you if a certain area of the body, makes it more dangerous for permanent health damage. I couldn't answer that question, but obviously just the diagnosis of that, any NBA fan will remember what happened to Chris Bosh. And yeah, I mean, for this, I mean, I wish we could have seen Bosh play several more years in a Miami Heat uniform, but I'll say it just as an NBA fan, because Victor Wembanyama is great for the sport, great for the league. I hope we get to see more. I hope they get this sorted out and figured out, because that is frightening, Ethan. That is always frightening when you hear about anything like that. Or, I'm a big soccer fan, and we've had, multiple players in the last 5 or 6 years like suffer cardiac arrest and have careers threatened. Like this stuff is super frightening, and you don't want, someone playing with thrombosis that could ultimately end up in somebody collapsing on the court. That is your biggest fear.
Well, it was the Heat's biggest fear, and
Yeah.
for those who don't know the backstory here, and again, this was from a different ailment, but Eric Spoelstra was playing for the University of Portland and was on the court when Hank Gathers died of a heart ailment right in front of him. There's a picture of Gathers dying right in front of Spoelstra. For those who don't remember Gathers, which is probably most people, he was part of a Loyola Marymount team that was like scoring like 150 points a game and was a projected first-round pick. And at a time where college basketball, I think, you got to know the players better now because they stayed for longer. And he was on that team with Bo Kimball, and Bo Kimball was shooting the left-handed free throws and everything. And that, I always will believe, and Spo was asked about it at the time, but that played into the Heat's decision to be so careful here. Spo had seen something like that happen. And again, with Bosch, it didn't turn out to be an isolated incident. Now, the Spurs, according to Shams, are saying the Spurs believe this is an isolated condition. So that's good.
Hope so.
But we'll see. I believe the Bosch blood clots were in his leg. This is in the shoulder. I
Yeah.
don't know that the location on the body matters, but it's a little bit of a different situation. This comes in for our guy Alfredo Arteaga. The unspoken truth here it is. The unspoken truth about deep vein thrombosis is not the condition, but that common sports injuries like dislocated shoulders or sprained ankles or MCL strains can be fatal. Yes, of course. Alfredo's our host of 3 Yards Per Carry. I just it's just to see a name like that. I mean, there was another news today, and we'll get to the NFL thing in a second, but that Bobby Portis has been suspended for the rest of the season for apparently taking a pain medication that his assistant accidentally switched. So he took the wrong medication. It tested positive. I am hoping. And Mark Bartelstein, his agent, is a longtime NBA agent, jumped out pretty quickly to make the case that like this should be reduced.
Yeah.
It was a little bit ridiculous to me. The pain medication that he's accused of taking is like a moderate pain. It's a moderate pain medication. It's not performance enhancing by strict definition. So, but the hope, I hope that they rolled out. But anyway, that was the big NBA news today. Until this,
Yeah.
That and Tyler Hero's Raising Cane's commercial. So anyway, I hope.
Yeah, I was watching that a couple out. Can they let the man rest for a little bit? Like,
no, but he's gonna get the endorsements though now. Like that's the
true.
thing. Like
That's
Tyler is, I mean, he's kind of a unicorn. He's gonna get endorsements, no question about it. So I mean, he should lean into it while he can. I mean, that's.
Well, and by the way, you talk about leaning into Raising Cane's commercials. Can we get Carson Beck on one of those commercials? Like Raising.
Did you hear what happened to Carson Beck? By the way,
his cars got stolen. Yeah,
that happened to me last week. He's got a nicer car.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
so your Lamborghini got stolen last week.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm going to tell everybody is that I had one, but it got taken. Now, my car ended up in Allapattah somehow. We're taking the Tamarack down in Allapattah. They did the world tour. They probably hit a couple of Raising Canes on the ways. All right, we're going to get to our actual topic here in a second, but the Wemby news threw us off here a little bit at the beginning of the show. Of course, Alex and I are on typically Tuesdays and Thursdays. This week it was Wednesday and Thursday. Yesterday, we went through Tyler's comments about not being a contender this year, and we addressed that a little bit on 5 on the Floor last night as well. All right, but let's talk about our sponsor, and then after our sponsor, let's get to some conversation here on the Martin Incognito thing. It's All Pro Construction Builders. You can find them at allproconstructionbuilders.com. Our guy Danny, that's the one to reach out to. Again, this is locally owned company. If you need, and this is the important thing here, if you need anything related to hurricanes to protect your house or your place of business, do it now. Don't wait. 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. Locally owned, family business, huge Heat fans, based in Miami. Trustworthy people. You'll deal directly with the owner. Again, it's allproconstructionbuilders.com. All Pro Construction Builders on Instagram. Again, the phone number. Reach out to Danny directly. You get a 5% discount on your entire order if you mention 305 guys, 5 on the floor, or 5 Reasons Sports. It's 305-484-4429. All right, so it's interesting. I was looking. The report, the story came out, and they did speak to Jonathan Martin. And for those who don't remember, this was quote unquote Bullygate. It's 10 years ago now. We all got old, and at that time, Jonathan Martin was his former second-round pick. Richie Incognito was kind of a journeyman who had blossomed in Miami. Rough edges type guy, but was very well liked by the media.
And very well liked by most of his teammates, if not all, despite the reports that came out.
Right. Exactly. And so and Jonathan Martin came from Stanford. Seemed like, it was an interesting fit in that group on the offensive line. And then the reports started to come out about things that were happening behind the scenes. And of course, that led to a commissioned report, the Wells report, everything else that went along those lines. And then the reality is, Richie Incognito's image took a serious hit, as did his bank account, because it took him time to get back into the NFL. He ended up filling a prominent role again, but it took him some time to get back there. Jonathan Martin, this was mostly a story about him kind of finding his way. I guess he's in the Bitcoin space now and all that. And there was a lot of speculation at the time, Alex, and this is where I want to go to you, is that it was really his family that was most involved in perceiving the treatment of Martin as bullying. But I just want to be clear on this. At the time, I don't think Martin ever shot any of that down. Correct?
No.
Is that fair?
100% fair. He had every opportunity to shut it down. Instead, he shut himself off. Like, he wasn't, he kind of stayed behind the scenes and kind of let his mom do the talking for him, and he just sort of waited it all out.
And I was reading some of these tweets, like Nolan Carroll, who was, if for those who don't remember, was a defensive back at that time. I mean, people are speaking out now about, what was really going on in that locker room. And I'm going to try to find Nolan's. He's going to say, this is in response to a quote that was put on a tweet. Former Dolphins offensive lineman Jonathan Martin says he, quote, never believed for a second that he was being bullied by Richie Incognito. Now, there were voicemails. There were other things that some people in a certain context might find offensive. So I'm not diminishing any of that. There's also stuff that goes on in workplaces and between teammates that, particularly in that culture, offensive line culture specifically, where there is a certain amount of ribbing that goes on, and you can argue what crosses the line. But the key point of this is that the player is saying he never believed for a second that he was bullied. And so then you have this response from Nolan Carroll, who you can follow him at Carroll City. He says, not going to say one guy messed up a season because we were up and down that year, but the negative attention and careers he messed up, Kevin O'Neill, John Jerry, Richie Incognito, obviously, Mike P. I'm trying to figure out who that would be. Coach Philbin, who was the coach at the time. He says, you all don't understand. Every day, it was never about opponents, but how bad of a locker room we had, which we didn't. I remember when he, speaking of Martin, was crying, leaving the locker room because he couldn't handle that he just wasn't playing good, didn't bother to work himself out of the hole. He just ran like a coward, ! Admitting this now does nothing. I don't respect him, never will. Your thoughts on that?
Well, to me, it sounds like, and Jonathan Martin, like, the conversation just came out. It was an Adam Schefter report over the weekend where he said, I never believed I was actually getting bullied. And so, like, and listen, Martin didn't explicitly say, like, oh, you all should treat me like a hero now that I admit. Like, he didn't say that. I know some people are looking, myself included, at, oh, okay, so you're telling the truth now. You couldn't have told the truth a decade ago. Like, you couldn't have come out then and address the situation that you never actually felt bullied. And then, to me, like, another tragic part about this, Ethan, and it goes to show you that if you're running an investigation, because remember, Ted Wells got basically two weeks where he got to basically subpoena power to interview anybody in the Dolphins facility, talk to everyone, collect his evidence and his reports. And yeah, Ted Wells, and I read that entire report, and we actually talked about this a couple weeks ago. I read that entire 144-page report. I was doing a daily radio show on WQAM at the time, so I felt like I had to read it, and I just, it just seemed very off to me, and the whole thing seemed like Wells was reaching for conclusions, and it just, like, felt like a lot of that stuff was, and obviously, again, like, I'm not saying every workplace should be like an NFL locker room, but NFL locker rooms, we have to understand, are different than your normal corporate environment. So I thought the Wells report was very sensationalized. And so it goes to show you, if at the end of the day, Martin never actually felt bullied, Yet the NFL clearly already had their conclusion that, hey, we need to get out in front of this and we need to look like we're coming down, we're cracking down on bullying, we're setting this great. And Ted Wells clearly had his hypothesis that, hey, I've got to show bullying took place. And he was able to do that in 144 pages. So to me, like, to find out there was never actually bullying going on and Wells still found a way to come to that conclusion in 144 pages is ridiculous. And listen, I don't know. I don't know what Incognito is going to do about this. And I don't know, like, if there's a statute of limitations on this stuff. But if he really wanted to lawyer up, they could probably quantify financial and maybe emotional damages that this thing caused. And maybe he should go after Ted Wells and the NFL and Jonathan Martin's family. And you go back to the thing about Martin's mother. Incognito strongly feels that Jonathan Martin's mother, who's, a psychiatrist, very intelligent woman, that she was able to weave this whole narrative together because A, it probably made her son look a lot better, that he didn't quit his team. He was bullied out of his team. And B, they got to salvage his signing bonus, which you usually don't get to keep if you quit your team. But extenuating circumstances, yeah, you do.
You do, and obviously the culture of the time too. I just remember a lot of those radio shows where there was a lot of defense of Martin without facts, and I think what you're getting.
And I did it. I probably did a lot of that. If I were to go back,
I probably did it too. Because I was on the air at that time as well, and I probably did it also. And I think this is another reason why when these kind of things happen, that most people don't know what's really going on. I think what we're kind of speaking to here is that it seems like the NFL, based on the Wells report, which I can tell you I did not read all of it. I read excerpts. I give you credit for that work.
You want to know real quick? You want to know why I read the whole thing? The real reason? I was supposed to go on the O'Reilly Factor. I got invited by Bill O'Reilly's producers to go on their show to talk about it. So I read the whole report.
That's how big a deal this was. Yeah,
but then a few hours before the show, I found out they were gonna have Troy Stratford on instead. Like, he was their first choice. I was like the backup to Troy Stratford, so I didn't get to go on the O'Reilly Factor, but I'd already read the report.
No, that's fun. Well, but it tells you though that these stories get sensationalized, and it does feel a little bit like the NFL did a report and they needed a scalp. I mean, that's kind of That's and look, I'm not saying that things with the Heat. With the Dolphins, we talked. We didn't have to talk Heat today. The things with the Dolphins are always perfect. They're not. Obviously, there's been a number of scandals throughout the years, but again, I think sometimes because there've been other scandals that there was a rush to judgment on this one, and there also was, and I know, it's hard to know what his role was in it, and you would know better by reading the whole report. But Joe Philbin was not the strongest head coach, and so I think it all fed into this idea that like things were running amok and and nobody had any control and all the rest of this. And it's just once a narrative starts to roll down the tracks, because I'll tell you, I honestly I was influenced by it also. Like you mentioned, I definitely did some radio hits on it at the time, not to the level that you were doing, but I liked Richie Incognito doesn't know me. I know you know him better than I do, but I was in on many interviews with him, and I always found him to be engaging and all the rest of this, very open with the media, and it colored my judgment on him as well at the time. And this one comes in, and this comes in from Alfredo. And this is a key. Oh, he might. I mean, that might be. He's talking about Jim Turner, I believe, in the comment there. But he said that head athletic trainer Kevin O'Neill and O-line coach Jim Turner were fired during the recommendations. I knew Kevin a little bit, okay, and Kevin, through the years, longtime Dolphins trainer, and I do think his name was besmirched in this particular situation as well. And again, it feels like, and the report better, I'll let you close on this, but like it feels like it was a report in search of a crime.
It was,
like, right? Yeah. Not to uncover something that was happening, but in search of a crime, and it got totally away from it. And at the very least, the man deserves an apology. I don't know legally how this works out and who you sue. Like you mentioned, you could sue the NFL, you could sue Martin, you could sue Martin's pants. I don't know, what the legal backing of any of that is going to be, like who the target of a lawsuit should be, and what would actually lead to the achieved goal of recovering some damages here. But the man deserves an apology from somebody. I think at the very least, maybe from Martin's family, and from Jonathan Martin himself, right?
And I think that's what Richie wants. I mean, I can't speak for him, but he doesn't strike me as being overly like the litigious type. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if he sees an opportunity at like collecting major damages, maybe he would jump. It seems to me more like he wants his name cleared, right? That and obviously he's a little upset that that is starting to happen, a decade plus later. But I think an apology would probably be more what he would be after in this situation. Yeah, and listen, in the Wells report, there was a lot of, and it's been like 11 years since I read it, but I do remember a lot of specific stories, and it wasn't even just Jonathan Martin, because Wells was trying to paint the picture of like Incognito allegedly bullying other people, like staff members, like the laundry guys, and he went into all these stories. But again, it's like a lot of it. And listen, I'm not saying Incognito is obviously not a choir boy. Like he's the type of guy that would be like giving somebody noogies in Revenge of the Nerds. Like that's like the type of guy he is. Like he's a gruff dude. But a lot of the stories that that Wells was talking about was stuff that it sounded like a little bit of just guy locker room stuff, hazing sort of things. I'm not saying hazing is good, but it's also not necessarily bullying depending on the context. And so, yeah, I mean, you take some of these stories out of context, and it, if you're reading this through the lens of, hey, this shouldn't be going on in my workplace if I work at an accounting firm or something.
Right.
But, I think the context of the NFL locker room is completely different. And, I like what you read earlier from Nolan Carroll, noting that, and I was covering practices in that era. Yeah, I was in, not that the media was always in the locker room, but we got to see the locker room a little bit. And it didn't seem like a bad locker room. Like it didn't seem like there were riffs and guys not getting, like it seemed like a normal, somewhat strong NFL locker room, but the narrative takes on the mind of its own.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It feels like the subject of a future 30 for 30 or whatever it is they call it these days, where
Yeah.
people start to get honest. I'm just Martin had to expect backlash now. He had to. Like for it to come out like 10, 11 years later and just like sort of flippantly say, well, there was no bullying. Yeah, that's a lot. Appreciate everybody for joining here on the show. We'll be back next week. Again, check out the rest of the content on the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel. A lot of Prize Picks content too coming up this week as well. So check it out. Is that the most embarrassing Dolphin scandal of all time? Well, we kind of did that the other day. I'm not. There's a bunch. There's a bunch. Chris Forster. There's a bunch. Maybe we'll document that again another time. All right. Have a good day, everybody.